I want you to put yourself in a very specific, very unforgiving place right now.
Right.
Transport yourself to the northern Ural Mountains.
Mm.
It is late February 1959.
Freezing cold.
Oh, incredibly cold. You're part of a search party, and you are standing on this completely wind-scoured, just desolate, frozen slope.
Yeah.
And all you can hear is the eerie, constant, high-pitched howl of the wind whipping across the crust of the snow.
Mm-hmm.
And right there, half buried in a drift, you find what you've been looking for. It's a tent.
But the relief of finding it, well, it evaporates almost instantly.
Exactly.
Because the physical evidence immediately suggests this terrifying narrative. I mean, you dig the snow away from this heavy canvas tent, and you realize it hasn't been torn by the brutal winds.
Right.
And it hasn't been unlaced from the outside by an intruder. The heavy fabric has been slashed open from the inside.
From the inside.
Yeah, the cuts are frantic. Someone took a knife and desperately sawed their way out rather than taking the, 5 or 10 seconds it would take to simply untie the front flaps.
And when you look inside through that violent tear, the scene gets even more deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
You see all of their survival gear. I mean, in a place where exposure to the elements kills you in a matter of minutes, their heavy winter coats are sitting right there.
It's crazy.
Their thick, insulated boots are all lined up. Their food rations are neatly organized. The stove is ready. It is a perfectly intact shelter. Except, the 9 people are gone.
Right. And then you look down at the snow, leading away from the slashed tent, heading downhill into this pitch-black -30°C blizzard.
-30.
Yeah, -30. There are 9 sets of footprints, and they are made by people wearing only socks.
Some are even barefoot, right?
Barefoot, yes. But here's the detail that absolutely breaks your brain. They aren't sprinting in a blind, chaotic panic.
Which is what you'd expect.
Exactly. But the stride lengths of those footprints show they are walking. Calmly. Deliberately.
Just marching.
Marching shoulder to shoulder away from their only source of shelter and warmth, straight down into a frozen abyss.
It's just this scene of profound forensic unease. It's physical evidence that logically simply shouldn't exist. You are standing over a slashed tent on Kholat Syakhl in 1959.
Yeah.
Welcome to our deep dive. Today we are looking at a forensic puzzle that has spawned 60 years of Yetis, aliens, and KGB cover-ups. The Dyatlov Pass incident.
It's arguably the most over-theorized mystery on the internet.
Oh, 100%. But we aren't here for ghost stories today.
Yeah.
We're going to treat these victims as real, highly capable people. We're going to examine the genuinely strange evidence honestly and dismantle 6 decades of myth.
And to do that, we are relying on a very specific stack of sources.
Right. Tell them what we've got.
We're drawing heavily upon the original historical expedition diaries, the records from 1959, the official 1959 Soviet inquiry, plus Donnie Aker's meticulously researched book, Dead Mountain.
Such a good book.
It really is. And we're also using a 2020 Russian Prosecutor General report, and most crucially, this groundbreaking 2021 peer-reviewed scientific study.
This is the big one.
Yeah, published in Communications, Earth and Environment, alongside some follow-up field research from 2022.
So we're going to find the quiet, actual answer waiting under the snow. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
To really grasp why the discovery of that slashed tent was so completely baffling to the search party, we first have to deeply understand who is actually inside it.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Because in pop culture mysteries and horror movies, victims are often treated as, doomed, foolish extras. The people who wander off alone into the dark woods.
Right, the teenagers making bad decisions. But the entire Dyatlov Pass mystery completely hinges on the fact that these were not amateurs making rookie mistakes.
Not at all.
These were highly skilled, elite individuals. And to understand them, we have to look at the cultural context of 1959 in the Soviet Union.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So this is the Khrushchev thaw. The intense, stifling paranoia of the Stalin years has eased up somewhat. Under Stalin, physical culture was highly regimented, mostly focused on, military preparedness.
Right, very control.
Exactly. But by the late 50s, among Soviet youth, there is this massive, thriving culture of wilderness, hiking, and mountaineering. It was a way to find true freedom.
Getting away from it all.
Yeah, out in the Urals or the Siberian taiga, there were no government microphones, no party officials. You could sing songs around a fire, push yourself physically and mentally, and just experience a rare kind of autonomy.
And this specific trip they planned, It wasn't just a casual weekend getaway with a few sleeping bags. This was an ambitious grade the third winter route.
Grade to third, yeah.
And in the Soviet hiking classification system of the time, grade third was the absolute highest degree of difficulty you could even attempt.
It wasn't a joke.
No. To even be allowed to go on a grade third expedition,
Yeah.
you couldn't just, sign a waiver.
Yeah.
You had to have a documented, extensive resume of severe weather survival and long-distance trekking.
You would prove it.
Right. You had to prove you had traversed hundreds of kilometers in freezing conditions. So think about their level of competence, like Olympic-level athletes or, the absolute most elite backcountry survivalists you see on specialized documentaries today.
Yeah, every knot they tied, every calorie they packed, it was calculated.
Exactly. So who were they?
Well, the group consisted of 10 students and recent graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk.
Smart kids.
Very bright, tough engineering and science students. And they were led by a 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov.
Dyatlov.
Yeah. He was an incredibly experienced and deeply respected trip leader. He actually had a reputation for building innovative gear. He made this lightweight, collapsible stove they brought with them.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and he was known for his rigorous preparation.
Wow.
He had led multiple grueling expeditions before this one without a single major incident.
Which is why the mountain pass where they died would eventually be named after him.
Yeah.
Hence the Dyatlov Pass incident. I want to pause on the fact that 10 students set out, but the searchers only found 9 sets of footprints.
Right, the one who lived.
Yeah, there was one person who lived.
Okay.
Yuri Yudin was the 10th member of the expedition. They set out in late January, taking trains and open-air trucks deep into the northern settlements before finally putting on their skis.
Which is a whole journey in itself.
Right. And a few days into the intense backcountry trek, Yudin developed severe joint pain. It was likely a bad flare-up of sciatica or rheumatism.
He was in sheer agony.
Yeah, breaking trail through deep powder with a massive canvas backpack was just physically impossible for him. He had to turn back.
And when you read his diaries and the accounts from that specific day, the emotional weight is staggering.
It's heartbreaking.
He was profoundly frustrated. He grumbled and complained about having to leave his best friends behind. He watched them ski off into the white distance, totally devastated that he was missing out on the adventure of a lifetime. He headed back to civilization feeling like a total failure.
And he had absolutely no idea that this debilitating illness was the only thing that saved his life.
No idea at all.
And the grim reality is, months later, he would be tasked with the incredibly heartbreaking job of standing in a morgue identifying their frozen belongings.
Oh, yeah.
Recognizing the wool sweaters and cameras of his closest friends. It was the survivor's guilt that is almost impossible to fathom.
But before the tragedy struck, the group left behind this incredible record of their final days. They brought cameras, they kept detailed group diaries, they even produced a satirical, handwritten newspaper for the tent called the Mount Otorten.
I love that detail.
Yeah. When you look at these records, they are just brimming with life.
The photographs are entirely human. You look at the film they developed from the recovered cameras, and it's not this grim, foreboding march toward death.
Not at all.
It's snowball fights. It's them posing in funny hats and hugging each other. The diaries talk about who is flirting with who. Zenaida Kolmogorova writes about local folklore they heard. Ludmila Dubinina complains playfully about being assigned to mend the tent canvas.
They're just kids having fun.
Yeah. They are making inside jokes, singing with a mandolin. It is a portrait of ordinary, vibrant happiness. They were in their absolute element.
They were thriving. Which brings us to February 1st.
Okay, the day of the incident.
Right. They are making their ascent, and as the afternoon light begins to fade, they pitch their final camp on the exposed slope of a mountain known to the indigenous Mansi people as Kholat Syakhl.
Now, we need to address a crucial caveat right away here. Kholat Syakhl is usually translated in English as Dead Mountain.
Right, which is essentially catnip for internet conspiracy theorists.
Oh, completely. People hear that and immediately think, well, they camped on Dead Mountain, it's cursed. Of course they were doomed. It plays perfectly into the horror movie trope.
But I want to firmly caution you, the listener, not to over-dramatize this detail. It's a convenient, grim gloss that gets used in pop retellings because it sounds wonderfully spooky.
Because it sells clicks.
Exactly. In reality, indigenous place names often refer to highly practical geographical features. Dead Mountain simply meant a place where nothing grows, or a peak that lacks game to hunt.
Like, don't bother hunting here.
Right, it was a hunting marker, not a mystical warning. We absolutely shouldn't build a supernatural case on a Stuckey translation of a place name.
I want to push back on their decision-making for a second, though. If Igor Dyatlov and this team were as incredibly competent and experienced as we just established, why on earth would they pitch their tent on an exposed, wind-scoured slope of a mountain?
It's a fair question.
Because the diaries show they were only about a mile away from the tree line. Down in the forest, they would have been protected from the howling wind. They would have had endless firewood.
Yeah.
Pitching on the bare slope in minus 20-degree weather seems like an arrogant rookie mistake. Why not just go down?
That is a highly logical question, and it's actually exactly what the initial searchers wondered too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But mountaineers of that era and modern alpine climbers today, they look at that decision and see a deliberate, strategic choice. Think about the physics of the hike. They had spent the entire grueling day fighting for every single foot of elevation.
Right.
If they had retreated down into the tree line to camp, they would have surrendered all that hard-won progress. The next morning, they would have had to exhaust themselves climbing back up through deep snow just to get back to where they started.
Oh, I see. It's like reaching a checkpoint in a marathon and deciding to walk a mile backwards just to rest. You're going to pay for it the next day.
Exactly the right analogy. Dyatlov also wanted to practice slope camping. It was a required skill for this grade of expedition.
Oh, so it's part of the training.
Yeah, he wanted to maintain their elevation, harden their skills, and get a jump on the next day's ridge walk. So they dug a flat shelf into the snow, pitched the heavy tent, ate a cold dinner of hardtack and cured fat to save time, because setting up the stove would take too long, and settled into their sleeping bags.
So it wasn't a mistake.
No, it was a calculated, rational decision made by a leader who knew exactly what his team was capable of enduring.
But that calm, calculated decision to preserve their elevation is exactly what put them in the crosshairs of what happened hours later.
Yeah, it is.
Every decision they made up to that point was deliberate, which means their flight from the tent had to be driven by something so sudden and absolute that it overwhelmed a lifetime of survival training.
And the search party timeline highlights just how unexpected this was. Because they were so highly experienced, they were expected back in the town of Vizai around February 12th. When they missed that date, it wasn't an immediate panic. In the backcountry, delays happen, blizzards slow you down. But by February 20th, with complete silence, the families and the university raised a massive alarm.
Yeah,
The military, fellow students, and local trackers were all deployed across the mountains.
So on February 26th, a search party pushing through the snow finally spots the tip of the tent poking out of a drift.
Right.
Let's meticulously lay out the physical clues they found, because the sheer impossibility of the scene is what built this mystery. We mentioned the slashed tent. The forensic analysis later proved the cuts were undeniably made from the inside.
Undeniably.
They didn't even bother to unbutton the toggles of the door. They used a knife to carve long vertical slits, tearing the thick canvas apart just to squeeze their bodies through.
And the psychology of that action is crucial. You do not destroy your highly specialized winter shelter unless you believe that staying inside it for even one more second means certain death.
Yeah, you're literally ruining your only protection.
You are trading the absolute certainty of freezing to death outside for whatever is happening inside.
But then you have the contradiction. The violent, desperate panic of the slashed tent is paired with the footprints leading away. Barefoot, or in socks, in roughly minus 25 to minus 30 degrees Celsius weather.
It's just wild.
The searchers saw the tracks of 8 or 9 people. The stride length indicated a normal walking pace. They were walking shoulder to shoulder in some places, single file in others.
Yeah.
They weren't scattering in a blind panic from a bear. They weren't running from an avalanche. They weren't fleeing armed men. They were moving together cohesively downhill toward the tree line.
And the footprints extended for over a mile. Can you imagine the discipline required to walk calmly in socks through thigh-deep snow in the freezing dark, knowing you don't have your coat?
It's terrifying.
It shows an organized retreat.
So the searchers follow this impossible trail. They trudge a mile downhill, away from the exposed slope, and they reach the edge of the Siberian taiga,
Right.
the forest. And there, under a very tall, old Siberian pine, often referred to in the reports as a cedar tree, they find the first devastating answers.
At the base of this cedar tree, they find the remains of a very small, improvised fire. And lying next to the ashes are 2 of the men from the expedition, Yuri Kvanashenko and Yuri Doroshenko.
Okay.
They are dead, completely frozen. But what shocked the searchers was that they were dressed only in their underwear.
Just their thermal underwear.
Mm.
In weather that freezes exposed skin in minutes.
Yeah.
I looked into the forensic reports, and alongside them, the searchers noticed something incredibly eerie about the cedar tree itself. The branches had been snapped off up to a height of about 5 meters.
5 meters up.
Yeah, and there were scraps of skin and blood embedded deep in the bark of the tree.
Meaning one or both of those men had frantically climbed that tree, tearing their hands to shreds on the rough bark in the freezing cold, breaking thick branches just to get a clear line of sight.
Like they were looking for something.
They were looking out over the forest canopy, looking back up the dark slope.
They were looking back up toward the tent. Like they were watching for something or waiting for something, checking to see if whatever drove them out was following them.
Right.
Or maybe checking to see if it was safe to go back. Because between that cedar tree at the edge of the forest and the abandoned tent a mile up the slope, the searchers find 3 more bodies.
Including the leader, Igor Dyatlov, along with Zenaida Kolmogorova and Rustam Slobodin.
Just scattered.
Yeah, they are spaced hundreds of yards apart in the snow. Dyatlov was clutching a small birch branch. Zenaida had blood on her face from where she fell into the crust of the snow. And when you look at their frozen poses, like the exact way they were positioned when rigor mortis and freezing set in, they were all facing uphill.
They're trying to crawl back up the mountain, back to the shelter, fighting against the gravity, the deep snow, and the freezing wind, trying to retrieve the sleeping bags and coats until their bodies simply gave out and they succumbed to hypothermia.
If we synthesize the scene based strictly on this physical evidence, we don't have a supernatural entity. We have a timeline of a desperate fight for survival. In the middle of the night, something causes an absolute total panic that forces them to instantly abandon their shelter without grabbing boots or coats.
Yeah.
But the moment they are outside, the panic subsides into their training. They realize they can't survive on the exposed slope. They stay together. They walk down to the trees where there is wood and less wind. They start a fire.
An organized response.
Exactly. 2 guys succumb first or sacrifice their clothes for the others. We don't know for sure. But realizing the tiny fire isn't enough to save the group, 3 of them, including the leader, make a heroic attempt to crawl back up that punishing slope to get the gear. And they die trying.
It is a devastating picture. It is a portrait of people fighting until their literal last breath to save each other.
It really is.
But here's the thing I want you, the listener, to focus on. So far, what we just described is a terrible, heartbreaking tragedy. People die of exposure in the mountains. The weather is unforgiving.
Right, that happens.
But what turns this from a tragedy into a world-famous mystery is the void at the center of the story.
Yeah.
Nothing in this physical evidence explains the initial trigger.
Exactly.
What could possibly be terrifying enough to make 9 elite survivalists choose the freezing dark over their tent, but not so terrifying that they couldn't calmly walk away from it?
Well, the mountain wasn't done giving up its secrets.
Oh, right. There's more.
Yeah, if the initial scene wasn't strange enough, as the seasons change, the details that emerge push this incident entirely out of the realm of a simple hiking accident and into the realm of legend.
Because the searchers are standing on that mountain with a grim mathematical problem. 9 hikers went up. Only 5 bodies have been found at the cedar tree and on the slope. The mountain is still holding 4 of them.
Yeah.
It wasn't until May of 1959, months later, when the massive snowdrifts finally began to yield to the spring melt, that the ravine gave up the rest of the team.
They're found buried under more than a dozen feet of snow in a ravine, further into the woods from that cedar tree.
Wow, a dozen feet.
Deep. And they had constructed a makeshift den out of pine branches down there, trying to insulate themselves. But the state of their bodies is what sends the entire investigation into a complete tailspin.
This is where it gets crazy.
Yeah, because unlike the first 5 who clearly died of hypothermia, the hikers in the ravine suffered catastrophic, perplexing injuries.
We are talking about major skull fractures. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had a fractured skull so severe it was fatal. Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov had flail chests,
Right.
which means their ribs were completely crushed inward on multiple sides. And a flail chest is incredibly lethal because you can't create the negative pressure needed to breathe. Your lungs essentially fail.
It's brutal.
And the coroner at the time stated that the blunt force required to crush a human chest cavity like that was comparable to a high-speed car crash.
But the massive paradox that stumped the forensic examiners was the lack of external trauma.
Oh, this is the weirdest part.
If a human being falls off a cliff or is beaten to death by an attacker or a large animal, you see massive soft tissue damage, lacerations, deep bruising, abrasions.
Right, you'd see the marks.
Exactly. These victims had the internal trauma of being hit by a freight train, but their skin and outer tissue were largely intact. It completely defied forensic logic for the era. How do you shatter someone's ribs without bruising their skin?
And this is where we have to address the most sensationalized detail of the entire case. I want to treat this with clinical sobriety because the internet loves to turn this into a horror movie.
Yes, please.
Ludmila Dubinina was found missing her eyes, her tongue, and some of the soft tissue around her face.
And when a layperson hears missing tongue and eyes, the mind immediately jumps to torture, ritual sacrifice, or animal mutilation.
Aliens.
Right, aliens. But you have to look at the environment. Where exactly was she found?
Right.
She was found face down in a running stream of meltwater at the bottom of a ravine after being exposed to the elements for over 3 months.
3 months in running water.
Yeah. The overwhelming forensic consensus attributes this entirely to normal, albeit grim, decomposition. Water rapidly accelerates tissue breakdown. The eyes and tongue are the softest, most exposed tissues on the body.
Right.
Natural scavengers, small animals, birds, or even the friction of the running water itself, they target these areas first. It is a natural biological process, not a clue to a murder.
I'm really glad we are explicitly explaining the forensic reality of that detail, because once you remove the monster ate her tongue theory, it becomes a sad reality of nature. You don't need a Yeti to explain decomposition.
Exactly.
But the coroner also found something else. The official reports show that traces of elevated radioactivity were found on some of the victims' clothing, specifically the clothing of the bodies in the ravine, like Alexander Kolovatov's jacket.
And that is the detail that truly launched 1,000 conspiracies.
I bet.
Radioactive clothes in the middle of the frozen Siberian wilderness, it feels like a glitch in reality.
But if you dig into the mechanics of the era, it actually makes perfect sense. In 1959, camping gear was incredibly different from what we use today. To get bright light in the pitch-black wilderness before LED headlamps, they used camping lanterns equipped with mantles.
Right, the mantles.
These mantles were coated with a chemical called thorium. When you heat thorium, it produces a brilliant, blinding white incandescence. It was highly effective. But thorium is a naturally radioactive metal.
And if you compound that with the fact that one of the group members, Krivonenko, had previously worked at the Mayak nuclear facility.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was the site of a massive secret nuclear disaster in 1957. He had actually helped clean up radioactive contamination.
So he brought it with him.
Exactly.
Oh.
If you have a guy whose old work trousers might have microscopic contamination, and he is huddled in a tent sharing clothes or washing clothes together with his friends, those trace elements spread.
That makes total sense.
The radiation wasn't the cause of death. It was an environmental artifact from their daily lives in the nuclear age of the Soviet Union.
But the lead investigator at the time, Lev Ivanov, didn't necessarily have the mandate to publicly discuss secret nuclear facilities.
Right. He couldn't.
And he couldn't reconcile the crushed ribs with the unbruised skin or the calm footprints. So he closes the 1959 Soviet inquiry. He looks at this bizarre tapestry of evidence, throws his hands up, and officially attributes the deaths to, and I quote, an unknown compelling natural force.
Unknown compelling natural force.
Yeah.
It is an incredibly poetic, maddeningly vague phrase. And once that phrase was put on official paper, the Soviet state effectively shelved and classified the files. Access was restricted. The families were told to stop asking questions.
You can think of that classified vacuum like a petri dish for conspiracies. When a tragedy happens and official channels go completely silent, human imagination rushes in to fill the void.
Oh, completely.
The Soviet government was notorious for secrecy, so naturally the public assumed a massive cover-up.
For 60 years, the theories poured in. People analyzed every speck of dirt and every shadow in those recovered photographs. They theorized it was a secret military parachute mine test that exploded over the tent, causing the internal injuries with a concussive shockwave.
Or the infrasound theory. I find this one fascinating from a physics perspective.
Oh, yeah, the wind stuff.
Yeah, the idea is that the specific dome shape of the mountain created a Kármán vortex street. It's an aerodynamic phenomenon that produces low-frequency sound waves.
Right.
Infrasound is below the threshold of human hearing, but it can induce feelings of profound dread, panic, and nausea in the human body. The theory was that the mountain literally sand them into a state of temporary insanity, driving them out of the tent.
It's an elegant theory, but there's zero evidence that topography there produces infrasound strong enough to cause that reaction. Then you had theories of KGB rendezvous with foreign spies that went wrong, Or, of course, the Yeti.
The Yeti.
The Russian Bigfoot, the Almas, tearing their tent open and crushing their chests with its bare hands.
And we have to take a hard pause right here, because there is one theory that had damaging real-world consequences. There was an intense, pervasive theory that the local indigenous Mansi people had attacked the hikers for trespassing on sacred land.
Yeah, we really need to address this.
We need to explicitly correct the historical record for anyone listening. The Mansi people were heavily investigated. They were interrogated by Soviet authorities, and they were entirely cleared.
Completely cleared. A real living ethnic group was suspected of a brutal mass murder based on absolutely zero evidence, simply because they lived nearby and the mountain had a slightly ominous translation to outsiders.
It's terrible.
The Mansis were incredibly cooperative with the search, their hunting trails were nowhere near the tent, and there was no forensic evidence of any other human presence on that slope. The footprints in the snow only ever belonged to the 9 hikers. No one else was there.
When you look at this sprawling mythology, the Yetis, the KGB, the death rays, why do we do this? Why do we invent these elaborate fictions?
It's a deeply human psychological response. We invent these sprawling, terrifying stories because we desperately need the universe to make sense.
Right.
9 brilliant, strong, capable young people dying for no reason on a camping trip is absurd. It's chaotic. It implies that the world is random, indifferent, and cruel.
Yeah, it's scary to think about.
If the KGB killed them, or if a monster killed them, well, at least there is a cause and effect. At least there is an intentional force. The human brain would rather be hunted by monsters than killed by pure, random bad luck.
But to find the truth, we have to step out of the mythology and look at the actual snow. Because for 60 years, the internet made a cottage industry out of Dyatlov Pass. But then, quietly, without much fanfare, the Russian authorities reopened the case in 2019.
They wanted to finally put it to rest.
In 2020, they released their conclusion. The Russian prosecutor general stated that the cause of the disaster was an avalanche.
And the global mountaineering community, along with the internet, collectively rolled its eyes.
I had the exact same skepticism when I read that. I looked at the report and said, wait a minute. First of all, the slope of Kholat Syakhl, where they pitched the tent, was around 23 to 30 degrees. In avalanche science, that is widely considered too shallow for a typical snowslide.
Right.
Second, when the searchers arrived weeks later, the tent was still there. It was partially buried, sure, but the poles were mostly upright. There was no massive debris field of snow like you see in avalanche videos.
Yeah, where is the snow?
And third, how in the world does soft, powdery snow inflict the blunt force trauma of a high-speed car crash without leaving a single scratch on their skin? It felt like a massive, convenient governmental handwave.
And your skepticism was entirely valid. The 2020 Russian report gave an answer, but it didn't provide the mechanical proof to back it up.
Exactly.
But the scientific process didn't stop there. The question became, what if our understanding of avalanches in this specific microclimate was too narrow?
Enter the science.
This sets the stage for a massive breakthrough in January 2021. 2 scientists, Johann Gaume from the EPFL in Switzerland and Alexander Puzrin from ETH Zurich.
Yeah.
They published a study in the highly respected, peer-reviewed journal Communications, Earth and Environment.
And these guys aren't just armchair sleuths looking at old photos. Johann Gaume is the head of the Snow and Avalanche Simulation Laboratory.
Right.
Alexander Puzrin is a leading expert in geotechnical engineering. They decided to take all those objections, the shallow slope, the lack of debris, the weird injuries, and feed them into rigorous mathematical and computer models.
To understand their breakthrough, we have to break down the precise mechanics of what their model proved.
Okay, walk us through it.
It starts with the exact way the hikers pitched their tent. As we discussed earlier, to sleep on a 30-degree slope, you can't just lie down, you will roll downhill. You have to create a flat surface.
Makes sense.
So the hikers dug a horizontal cut, a small shelf, right into the snowpack on the slope. By digging that shelf, they essentially undermined the structural integrity of the snow above them. They created an artificial weak point.
But they made that cut around 5:00 p.m. and they went to sleep. Nothing happened for hours, so the cut alone didn't cause the disaster.
Right. The second factor is the meteorological weather pattern that night. The region was hit by intensely strong katabatic winds.
Katabatic winds are fascinating. They are essentially an atmospheric avalanche.
Yeah.
Because cold air is denser and heavier than warm air. When a massive pool of freezing air gathers at the high peaks of a mountain range, gravity takes over. It pulls that dense air down the slope at incredible speeds.
And it's relentless.
And for hours and hours in the dark, this katabatic wind was relentlessly scouring the peak, picking up heavy, dense snow and transporting it down the mountain. It was piling all that fresh, heavy snow directly above the tent, right on top of the weakened overhang they had created by digging their shelf.
So the physical load on that snowpack is getting heavier and heavier, hour by hour.
Right.
And the third factor is the terrain itself. Gom and Puzrin looked at the specific topographical map of that exact spot on Kholat Syakhl. It wasn't a perfectly smooth, uniform slope. There were irregularities, burrowed rocks, slight dips.
Okay.
When you combine the cut step, the massive wind-loaded snow pressing down, and the friction of that specific irregular terrain, it created the absolute perfect, incredibly rare conditions for a delayed slab avalanche.
The slab avalanche. This is the absolute key to the entire mystery. When people hear avalanche, they think of a massive roaring cloud of loose, powdery snow taking out a whole forest.
Like in the movies?
Exactly. But a slab avalanche is structurally entirely different. Think of the snowpack not like loose sand, but like a massive, thick pane of frosted glass resting on a slanted roof.
Yeah, that's a good way to picture it.
The hikers cut a notch into the bottom of that glass. Then the wind stacked hundreds of pounds of weight on top of it. It didn't crumble into powder. It shattered along a fault line and slid down as one giant, cohesive, concrete-like block.
We are talking about a solid block of incredibly dense, heavy ice and snow, roughly the size of an SUV.
An SUV.
Yeah. Because of the exact conditions, this solid slab fractured along the line where they had cut into the slope, and it slid down. Crucially, it didn't roll a mile down the mountain.
Right.
The slope was too shallow for it to gain massive momentum. It just slid a few feet directly onto the tent.
Which explains why there was no massive debris field. It just shifted a few feet. But it slid down in the pitch black. The sleepers are lying flat on their backs in the tent. This solid block of dense snow, weighing hundreds and hundreds of pounds, drops directly onto them.
And that perfectly explains the forensic injuries.
Yes, a massive, blunt, heavy pressure, crushing the chest cavities and fracturing the skulls of the people sleeping on the edges of the tent. But because it's a flat block of snow pressing through a heavy canvas tent and wool sleeping bags, there is no sharp friction. No rocks, no branches scraping against them. It crushes the bones internally without leaving a single external scrape or cut on the skin.
The biomechanics fit perfectly. Gom and Puzrin used crash test dummy data to prove it. The force of a dense snow slab dropping a few feet onto a human chest resting on a hard surface is exactly equivalent to the force of a low-speed car crash.
So now, you can reconstruct the scene inside that tent. It is a nightmare scenario.
Oh, absolutely horrifying.
It's in the middle of the night. You are suddenly crushed by an immense weight. Your friends are screaming. Someone has broken ribs. Someone has a fractured skull. The tent has collapsed on top of you.
Yeah.
It's pitch dark. You are trapped under the snow, and you are suffocating. You don't have time to untie the frozen, intricate knots of the tent door. You grab your knife, you slash the canvas, and you drag your severely injured friends out into the howling blizzard.
And once you are out, you look back at the slope. You realize that another slab could come down at any second. The structural integrity of the slope is completely compromised.
You can't stay there.
You absolutely cannot stay there, and you cannot dig back into the collapsed tent for your boots without risking another collapse that would bury all of you permanently. You have to get off the slope immediately.
So they retreat. They support their injured friends, which explains why they're walking, not running. They're carrying people with crushed ribs.
Right.
They make it to the trees. But now they're in minus 30 degrees without coats.
Yeah.
And hypothermia takes over.
Yeah.
I looked into the medical literature on the bodies by the fire because finding people in their underwear in the snow sounds like a serial killer's calling card.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
But it's actually a known, brutal physiological response called paradoxical undressing.
Yes. In the final stages of severe hypothermia, as the body's thermoregulatory system completely collapses, the blood vessels suddenly dilate. You get a massive rush of warm blood to the extremities.
The victim literally feels like they are on fire. It's complete failure of the vasoconstriction that was keeping them alive. They tear off their own clothes because they feel unbearably hot, even as they freeze to death.
And the body's found crawling back up the slope. That connects to another grim medical reality called terminal burrowing.
Terminal burrowing.
Yeah. In the final moments of hypothermia, an ancient brainstem reflex kicks in, causing people to try to squeeze into small, enclosed spaces. Or, in the case of Dyatlov and the others, the desperate primal urge to get back to the shelter drove them to crawl up the mountain until their hearts simply stopped. Hypothermia finished the job that the snow began.
It is so brutally clear when you lay the science out like that, every single impossible clue. The slashed tent, the calm footprints, the crushed ribs with no bruises, the radiation, it all has a rational, terrifyingly ordinary explanation.
It really does.
But I have to bring up my absolute favorite detail about this entire study because it is just such a surreal collision of science and pop culture.
Oh, the code.
Yes. To actually prove this theory, Gaume needed an incredibly sophisticated computer model that could accurately simulate the physics of how a dense block of snow fractures and flows. Snow is notoriously difficult to model because it's not quite a fluid, but it's not quite a solid.
He needed a model that could calculate millions of discrete particles that can bind, bend, and shatter.
Right. And do you know where he found the code for that? He reportedly adapted the animation code originally written for the Disney movie Frozen.
It's so wild.
When Disney was making that movie, they spent millions developing new algorithms using something called the material point method, or MPM, to make the snow look hyper-realistic when it moved and cracked on screen.
Yeah.
Gaume saw the movie, realized the physics engine was incredibly accurate, got the code from the animators, and adapted it for geotechnical engineering. They literally used Disney's snow animation code to solve a 60-year-old Soviet cold case. It is absolutely brilliant.
It is a stunning repurposing of technology. But I want to highlight something incredibly important about Johann Gaume and Alexander Puzrin here. If we look at how rigorous science operates, what stands out is their profound humility.
Oh, absolutely.
They did not go on a press tour screaming that they had solved the case and closed the book forever.
No, they were extraordinarily careful in their paper to state that they did not claim to have solved the mystery with absolute certainty, because no one survived. Without a living witness, absolute certainty is impossible.
What they claimed and what they proved mathematically is that their slab avalanche model is plausible and entirely consistent with every single piece of physical evidence found on that mountain.
They proved it was scientifically possible.
And the scientific community backed them up. In 2021 and 2022, follow-up expeditions actually went back to Dyatlov Pass in the dead of winter, and they documented real active slab avalanches happening on that exact slope under similar weather conditions. The internet said the slope was too shallow, but the mountain itself proved the internet wrong.
So what does this all mean for us as observers of this history? It brings us to a final synthesis. When you strip away the Yeti, the secret agents, and the sound wave weapons, you are left with a truth that is smaller, colder, and infinitely sadder.
Yeah.
The mountain never kept a secret. We did. We hoarded a classified Soviet file, and we fed a hunger for a story that was stranger than snow. We wanted a monster. Because, honestly, an indifferent mountain that can drop a block of ice on 9 capable people who did almost everything right, that is much harder for the human psyche to accept than a haunted mountain.
Because a haunted mountain gives us a villain to blame.
Exactly. An avalanche just gives us gravity and bad luck.
And for decades, the world focused so intensely on the mystery that they completely forgot the humans at the center of it. They treated them as props in a puzzle. The most important thing we can do today is restore their dignity. Give them back their names, rather than the myth that swallowed them. Their names were Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Ludmila Dubinina, Rustam Slobodin, Georgy Krivonashenko, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolovatov, and Yuri Doroshenko.
They were young, they were brilliant, they were deeply loved, and they were incredibly good at what they did. And on a freezing night in 1959, the mountain simply let go.
That's a tragedy.
I want to leave you listening right now with one final provocative thought to mull over. If a 60-year-old, seemingly supernatural mystery that spawned 1,000 conspiracy theories was finally elegantly explained by adapting snow rendering code from a modern animated Disney movie, what other great historical mysteries are currently wrapped in conspiracies simply because the precise physics, the environmental models, or the software haven't been invented yet?
It makes you wonder.
How many ghosts in our history books are just weather, waiting for the right algorithm? Keep questioning the unknown, keep exploring the mysteries, but always keep one foot planted in careful science. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.